What I want to do tonight is jump right into Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. Probably most of us are aware of the fact that in 2020, these three planets are going to be congregating together and making conjunctions. It's going to start with Saturn making a conjunction to Pluto January 12th, 2020 at 23 Capricorn. Jupiter is going to make 3 conjunctions to Pluto in 2020 between 23 and 25 degrees Capricorn. And that's going to be followed with Jupiter making a conjunction to Saturn right along the winter solstice, December 21st of 2020 at 0.5 degrees Aquarius. So there's a lot to breaking these 3 down, as well as some other things. And so tonight's going to be more of talking on the collective, because in the second series we're going to do, which is 3 parts, which is looking at Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto transiting through Capricorn through the 12 houses. That's going to be more personal. So thank you for bearing with me tonight as we look at most of these cycles from a collective level. Many of you might remember back in 2014-15 when Saturn was in Scorpio, it made a 3 waning semi-squares to Pluto. They were in mutual reception in each other's sign. That initiated that balsamic phase, and that's the last of the 8 phases in the 360-degree circle. Balsamic phase is returning back to source, returning back to broad spiritual principles. It's also about resolution and karma and resolving whatever needs to be addressed in any way from the original conjunction. This balsamic phase, as you can see, is 2014 through 2020, and during that time period we've had Saturn in Scorpio all the way through Sag, and of course now this initiation into Capricorn for the next 3 years before the Pluto conjunction. This will continue to have us see old realities and structures crumbling. And because individually, collectively, we can be so security orientated, this tendency for a soul to project past forward, we resist releasing the control. We resist the old realities. And all you have to do is look at the United States politics and the Republican Party that has control of both chambers of Congress. And they're like the dinosaurs turning back any social progress that has been made over the last 8 years of the previous administration. And as I've had a year to reflect upon Donald Trump being elected president, I think that the Republican Party can really see they are dinosaurs. And so they're going to grab as much of the Saturnian, Capricornian control as they can, because they realize it's that last grasp. What happens though here, and this is where you see your hope, the degree of resistance has a corresponding degree of cataclysm, because resisting forces are always overcome by evolutionary forces. We don't have to have cataclysms except to the degree that we resist. And so you can just watch this going on such a collective level. It also, when it's balsamic phase, is going to represent the whole death and rebirth archetype as well, both figurative and literal. As we go through that balsamic phase in the last 45 degrees of the circle, the closer and closer we get to a conjunction, the more the seed thoughts of the new beginnings are breaking free, busting forth into consciousness. And of course, with Capricorn, what it would mean was to make some effort in that physical world to step into those new ways before we actually have that conjunction of Saturn and Pluto in this case. So keep this in mind. You're continually looking at the larger picture, deeper meanings, especially as everything that's a Capricorn word here, social structures, relationships, infrastructure, career, finances, they're not working. They're changing, they're crumbling. Pay attention to those future-orientated messages and act upon them. This will be a specific way to counteract Capricornian despondency and depression. Who amongst us can feel that collective angst and collective depression as here in the US and probably other places worldwide? We look at conservative interests gamble to control as much of the political power and resources as possible. I cannot remember where this statistic came from. I didn't write down the source of it. But somewhere in the last year, I remember reading that 8 individuals in this world, and then didn't list the 8. 8 people have as much wealth as the other half of the world combined. 8 people have as much wealth as 3.5 billion people. I don't know if you can get more extreme with that than Pluto and Capricorn. Stay tuned. We'll see if Saturn makes it worse or if Saturn starts to bring about some changes with it as it goes through Capricorn, because in and of itself in Capricorn, as we talked previously last webinar, it is a new cycle for Saturn when it goes into Capricorn. Here again, it's going to be very necessary to organize interests of the many and channel that depression into changing structures from the ground up, the Cancer polarity. And it doesn't matter what the interests are, be it climate change, be it race equality, be it wealth distribution, be it how we create our legislative districts. Pick your subject, pick your pet issue or issues, pick whatever is of importance to you right now. We're going to see those wide variety of interests of the many start to come together and make changes. And the first example of that was last month in the United States, the November elections in the off year, the odd year. And as we had discussed last webinar, excuse my burp. I thought I had my meal early enough. We elected a Muslim mayor in the state of Helena, Montana. We elected, a trans person who directly confronted the legislator in North Carolina who brought forth the bathroom bills, if you remember any of that. So there's a wide variety of issues that we're just going to continue to see the masses come together with during this balsamic phase. And again, start to create these new structures. We do not have to wait till these 3 conjunctions between Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. Here is the Gemini rising chart with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, and I'm going to be pointing charts out to you all the time because it's sometimes easier to see it visually. I used the July 4th chart for 2:13 a.m. in Philadelphia. Almost everything that we're going to look at tonight is also going to be true for the Sibley chart, which is 5:10 p.m. The only thing that really changes between the 2 charts for the most part is all the houses and the degree of the moon. These slower moving planets, Mercury might move a degree. These slower moving planets don't move very much. Here's that conjunction from January 12th at about 23 degrees Capricorn, still balsamic to Pluto, but getting closer and closer and closer, and being pretty close in its opposition to the natal Mercury in Cancer. And so we're going to have another intense United States presidential election cycle. And we can also expect there to be extreme choices on candidates, just as there was in this cycle. And even if you didn't think, Hillary Clinton from the 2016 cycle was that much different than Trump. A year later, can you see that she is? And of course, Bernie Sanders was the complete opposite of Donald Trump. We will continue to see that through this next election cycle. We will also have all of the wealth inequality become more and more visible and protested. And because transiting Pluto, Saturn at 23 cap will still be balsamic the natal US Pluto, we're going to continue to see the US standing in the world crumble. We are not the world cop anymore. And we have a single person, namely Donald Trump, who, if he keeps going the way he is going to manage to piss off every other country in the world. And pretty soon they're going to start doing their grassroots combining, whether it's climate change or it is trade agreements or, you know, financial banking interests. They're going to start going together without us. I remember Jeffrey Green saying years ago that, you know, the US is going to have Pluto in Capricorn, its fall from grace, and it's going to have to go through its reckoning of becoming an equal player with other countries on planet Earth. We can definitely see that this type of lessening is, you know, being it's coming into reality. And who thought Donald Trump would be the one to create that? Yeah. Saturn's conjunction to Pluto, when it comes in 2020, is going to initiate a brand new 33-year cycle between them. And I want you to remember that whatever swings left and swings right can swing back left all over again, even more. And every structure, one more time, that is crumbling is opportunity to rebuild. How are we going to do it? As we start to move through this next year, look at the numerology. 2017 was a 1 year. 2018 is a 2 year. A 2 year is all about building foundations. So while it might look like destroying national monuments and opening them up for, you know, mineral extraction seems a new beginning, just because it isn't in the news doesn't mean national, international, local environmental organizations aren't all moving to organize together to fight this in the courts, or to, you know, bring the people together to look for new candidates that will run for office to change things on a congressional level, be it, you know, federal or state or whatever way. These building foundations are going to come from the new beginnings with both the left and the right. And there isn't anything that says it's fated to go one way or another. As I've said, it is the degree that all of us, the active many, are willing to be active that will determine what happens. Of course, because this conjunction is taking place in Capricorn and close to the US Pluto, there's going to be those that have the haves, the plutocrats, the oligarchs, the wealthy elites. They're going to continue to try and take us backwards or to protect what they have. And that's going to be met with all of this resistance, as you've known that word. And again, whatever consistent efforts each of us want to make individually that then moves it forward collectively. And while I'm using the US as an example most of the time, you know, these cycles are, you know, these trends and planetary patterns are pretty much universal. If you're an international listener to this, you could probably speak up and give examples of how this is taking place in your country, whichever country it is. There's going to be that whole back and forth between what we would call conservative or liberal, or what we would call excluding versus including.